Hi, folks. With Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the it's bellowing all across the United States, the Karmelo Anthony Austin Metcalf incident, where Karmelo Anthony's been charged with, in front of numerous witnesses, so the facts don't appear to be in dispute here, murdered Austin Metcalf. Now, the sort of the wider issue here, if it was two black kids, one murdering the other, nobody would care. If it was two white kids, nobody cared. But the killer is, or the alleged killer is black, and the dead dude's white. So this has now turned into a sort of a hill to die on for every black race hustler and grifter in the United States. And anyway, regardless of that, the defense that, as I understand it, at least, that the grifters are using, the defense is that we're not disputing the facts, but hey, like, guess what? The guy's white, they're racist, they're bigots, they're Nazis, da 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 da. So really, considering all that, hey, just let the black kid off, all right, and this is a play out of what I perceived, or I first noticed, and I think it was the very first case, or certainly very, very first high-profile sort of race-type case, where this was one of the earlier times I was in, or one of the times rather, I was in Los Angeles, and this is when the Rodney King case blew up. And I'll just give a little bit of background there. Mr. King, Rodney King, was a black guy, and it was in Los Angeles, and he had a bit of a rap sheet, so he was known to police, and then it's stuff like it was speeding, drink driving, assault, violence, and so on. So you wouldn't call him a hardcore criminal or something like that, but certainly known to the authorities. And he had some outstanding warrants and fines, and he's driving along, and the police pull him over for just an ordinary traffic offence, or try to pull him over. I mean, it was no big deal. But I think he Mr. King would have realised that if they had pulled him over and run a check, that they'd have arrested him for these outstanding warrants he had. So he decided to risk fleeing from the scene. So instead of pulling over, and it would have been a non-event at that point, but instead of that, he decides to take off, and it's a high-speed police chase. I think it involves like 4 or 5 police cars. They try and bring him in, corner him, and he's doing all sorts of damage and going at high speeds. Already now the violations are mounting up. It's now getting pretty serious. When they finally stop him, and he then decides to fight with the police, and he's a pretty sort of big guy, fit guy, and so he decides to fight with police. More officers get involved. They try and put cuffs on him. He won't be cuffed. They're trying to subdue him, and he's fighting every step of the way. So they end up, because he's assaulting them. So the police end up using force that seemed to be a bit excessive, I would have thought. But when you look at the whole thing and the way he was fighting them and punching them and all that sort of thing, you can see that level of force was not surprising under those circumstances. And even when he's in handcuffs and they're telling him stay on the ground, he still tries to get up and get away. And so anyway, so this is all the things. So now when and again, I was in Los Angeles at this time, and it seemed to be creating a bit of a stir. And looking at the media, in my hotel room, looking at it seemed to be that there were various forces that were, trying to move into place, and this was a hill they wanted to die on. Now, something that I noticed, and I thought it was a bad situation, even as a young man. I'm in my 20s, like mid-20s, or 26, 27, or something like that. I thought, this is not good. They're treating the facts as irrelevant. So what if he didn't stop? So what if he had outstanding warrants? So what if he had a long rap sheet? So what if he fought with police? So what if he didn't? So what if he refused to be cuffed? So what if he kept on trying to run away? None of these things matter. So what if he assaulted the police? None of this matters. What matters is the racism that lay in the heart of these white officers. That's what the issue is. Now, when I thought that wouldn't get traction, I thought, what a load of nonsense. There's just a bunch of two-bit grifters and hustlers just trying it on. But I noticed it was getting traction. And at that time, I had to, I spent a lot of time in the United States during that few years. So I was there throughout the whole thing, coming back every few weeks to LA and that sort of stuff. And seeing how it played out. And I was also in LA when the trials began. Now, the trials played out over a few years, so and there were appeals and trials upon trials. And again, it was a hill that everybody wanted to die on, or certainly the people who wanted to play the race card. Now, the courts, in my view at least, were being turned into absolute circuses. These black activists, race hustler, grifter activists, were allowed sort of vast latitude to try and do their race hustling. When if I was the judge, I wouldn't have allowed that for 1 second. Stick to the facts, buddy, and that's it. But again, and it came up that even in the court hearings, they didn't actually dispute that the black guy, this is Mr. King, they didn't dispute that he'd committed those crimes. Didn't dispute that he'd run off. Didn't dispute that he fought. But none of that was in dispute. None of the incriminating facts that I believe were central to the case and the only facts that mattered, they didn't dispute any of these facts. They just used the argument that the force at the end, right at the very end, this is while he's still trying to get away and fighting them, the force at the very end was excessive, and it was excessive only because of evil, white, bigoted racism. So now how you prove that, or what bar you have or criteria you have for proving it, was simply that the force used was excessive. They wouldn't have done this to a white guy. But it's, unless the guy was drugged out of his mind, that I don't think a white guy would have struggled like this. And they probably wouldn't have had those sort of warrants out. This sort of, so there's a whole lot of other factors there that again, have nothing to do with racism or anything resembling it. But the constant theme was, and every time I switched on the TV and there were these grifters, again, given lots of airtime on the television, politicians were sort of mouthing all sorts of platitudes that suggested or implied sympathy. Every university, sociology lecturers can go, anti-black hatred is rampant. Nazis are everywhere. So that sort of dialogue was already in place. I mean, it intensified over time and broadened its base, but it was there. Now, at the time, I thought this is going to a bad place. The facts of the case have just been deemed as irrelevant. All that they're focusing on is the supposed feelings, deep in the heart of people here. And because the officers were white, I don't know if all of them were, but certainly a majority were. It's the police officer that arrested Mr. King. Because those officers were white and Mr. King was black, that was it. Bang! Racism. And again, the courts and the media and gave them airtime and gave them a platform to scream from that in any sane society wouldn't have been allowed. And this was the first case that I'm aware of, certainly the first high profile case, and it got national coverage. I mean, even when I was in New York or Dallas or something like that, and it still got coverage, maybe not as much as if you'd been in LA, but still got coverage. And the cameras were in the courtroom. And I think there was an Asian judge from memory that was hearing at least the first case. Now, again, you've got an odd case. No one disputes the criminality or the criminal behaviour of Rodney King. No one disputes it. It's not they're not trying to fight that. It's beyond dispute. So they think, okay, screw that. We're just talking about racist cops here. So everything swung on the supposed racism. And that was the reason why they arrested this guy, only because he was black. No, it wasn't. He refused a traffic stop and they had to chase him. But anyway, that was the thing how it plays. Now, if we look at the way the grifters are playing the Karmelo Anthony thing, is that really it's just racist bigots. That's all it is. And if you listen to or look at their press releases and everything, I mean, it's outrageous lies. I mean, they say the other guys are the racists. You got to look at what they're saying. But they're being permitted, not only they're being allowed this huge platform that Kyle Rittenhouse didn't get. He wasn't allowed to put deposits. So every media outlet, everything was against Kyle Rittenhouse. Everything was against him. The states, the government went after him with an absolute vengeance. I mean, no resource, every resource available was thrown at Kyle Rittenhouse, even though he hadn't committed a crime. Now, here's a fairly straightforward gig here, and and yet they're trying to pretend that the crime itself doesn't matter. It's just there's some sort of miasma of racism, in the background, and that's the issue, not the crime itself. I'm just going through a few things here. Firstly, is the family. This is the family of Karmelo Anthony has been able to raise. I think it's pushing $1 million now, raised through like online, GoFundMe type stuff. And there's no one trying to take that down. Now, there's quite a few white people have tried to do that, even when they're innocent, for goodness sakes. Quite a few white people have tried to do this. And the platforms that do this GoFundMe stuff shut them down, or won't let them have the money, or won't collect money, or in some way obstruct and prevent the white guy from getting the funding, which may be for a legal team or something like that. Now, in the case of Karmelo Anthony, they couldn't have rolled out a red carpet sort of more sort of substantially than they did, and the fact that and again, the facts aren't really in dispute here. The fact that someone could so brazenly murder a fellow citizen and then still be able to collect all this money, I think speaks volumes as to what's going on here. Who are these people who are really paying the money? It seems like there are people who look like they've got barely a nickel to bless themselves with, but they're giving $500 or $1,000 to. So where is the money actually coming from? I mean, we could look at that, because this is one massive race hustle, a huge race hustle. The other thing is that he's a 17-year-old high school kid. He's due, the school year ends pretty soon. He's got supposedly these well-behaved, loving parents. The mother speaks like she's a 5-year-old child. I don't know. Neither of them appear to be very high IQ, from what I can gather. But why have they got a 17-year-old kid that is that angry? I mean, wow, is this kid angry? You dare touch me or touch my backpack, and I will murder you. And I've got a knife here to do it. I mean, what? I mean, is anyone that angry at 17? I mean, the guy, he's at school and he's got supposedly a home to live in with an intact family. So how can anyone be that angry? Now, this seems to me almost inconceivable. What sort of upbringing has he had, given that he's murderous hair trigger angry? Now he goes to the sports day and he goes into the tent of the opposing team, and somebody says, this Austin Metcalf guy says, you're in the wrong tent, or that's your tent over there, or what are you doing here? Why don't you leave? And he says, you're gonna make me? Yeah, you wanna? You put a hand on me and see what happens, motherfucker. And then the guy says, look, here's your backpack. My understanding is that the Austin Metcalf gave the guy his backpack and said, off you go. And for that got murdered. That's how angry this kid was. Now, how was he ginned up to be that angry? Was he filled with anti-white hatred? If so, how? How was he ginned up? What sort of investigation will be that? Now, when I look at the resources that the government put to go and chase after Kyle Rittenhouse, and then the resources that, from what I can tell, that appear to be put in place by the government, because the public prosecuting, the local attorney general will be running the case. When I look at certainly so far, look at the resources they're putting into pursuing this kid, it's nowhere near the same. We are not talking anywhere near the same. So, it appears to be a very half-hearted, minimal effort to go and chase after this kid. Whereas Kyle Rittenhouse, they couldn't get it. And again, they had the whole national media telling the most outrageous lies about he crossed state lines with nuclear weapons and killed 1 million people. And the things they said about him, the lies upon lies. And fortunately, the jury acquitted. But I thought it was a bit of a close-run thing, really, because, again, every piece of media, every government instrumentality, everything was out to get Rittenhouse and make an example of him, and instead he managed to get acquitted. I mean, the evidence was such that you couldn't have found him guilty, but that doesn't matter today. And we need to go back, I think, to the Rodney King case, which I think kicked off this whole attitude of the facts don't matter. It's just the ideology. And what we know is that America is an evil fascist Nazi, Hitler, racist, bigot, and that means all crimes made by people of the supposed least social power, all crimes they commit, be it murder or anything else, should go unpunished. And that is the punishment that the white people should get for oppressing us. Whether we steal from them or murder them, they had it coming. And that's, I think, what the Rodney King case kicked off. And back then, I could see where it was going, even though I was a 26, 27-year-old guy. I could see where it was going. And I mentioned this to people. And nobody, everyone I spoke to thought I was crazy, or what are you talking about? What nonsense. And, but it's gone exactly where I thought it would. And this is where we are today. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.